Let me tell you about a story almost as old as computer science itself. This is Joseph Weizenbaum. You might not recognize him, but he was a big name in artificial intelligence research in the 1960s, and not just because of his glorious mustache. In his lab at MIT, Weizenbaum came to a troubling realization. It is surprisingly easy to trick humans into treating computer programs as they would treat other humans. Here's how Weizenbaum came to that conclusion. He built one of the world's very first chatbots, computer programs that could converse with humans through text in ordinary language, like English or Spanish. With his collaborators, Weizenbaum built several chatbots, including one called Eliza. If you have a smartphone or another smart device, you're probably familiar with modern virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa. Think of Eliza as their distant ancestors. You could write to it by typing on a keyboard, and it would automatically compose answers in English. And what Eliza would respond was determined by a long list of simple programming rules based on keywords in the input. Now, that may sound fancy, but it was essentially a clever bag of tricks, a list of predetermined scripts that left no room for genuine thought or improvisation. For example, if Eliza encountered a sentence with the word alike, such as llamas and alpacas are alike, it was programmed to always answer with, in what way? There is no real intelligence there, just a compelling illusion. But here is the remarkable thing. People started talking to Eliza as if they were talking to real humans. In fact, Weizenbaum was so rattled by this observation that he wrote an entire book to warn the public about its implications. In the book, he recounts one anecdote that left a lasting impression on him. One day, he let his secretary interact with Eliza. And of course, his secretary had seen him work on Eliza for months, and she was perfectly aware that it was just a computer program. And yet, with it just a few back and forths, she asked Weizenbaum to leave the room so she could talk to Eliza privately. And this was not just an isolated event. It happened over and over again on the campus of MIT when people came to talk to Eliza. Fairly quickly, they would start sharing intimate details about their lives, as one would with a friend or with a counselor. Of course, if you interacted with Eliza long enough, it would eventually reveal its tricks and shortcomings. But this was only the beginning. Chatbots have come a very long way since the early days of Eliza. And I would like to convince you that Weizenbaum's prescient concerns are more relevant today than ever. Before we fast forward to the present day, though, I want to take you on a further detour to the past and tell you about a classic psychology experiment. Let's watch a little video together. I want you to watch this video and think about what's happening in it. This is from an experiment conducted by Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel in 1944. And what they did is they selected a group of undergraduate students, and they showed them this very video, and they asked them to describe what they saw. Now, what do you think they said? Do you think they described simple geometric shapes moving around a screen? Well, if you're anything like them, that's not really what you saw. Indeed, they described animate agents, imbued with their own intentions, personality, feelings even. They described a dramatic story in which the circle and the small triangle are getting ambushed by the big triangle, described as a big bully who's trying to compete for the attention of the circle, who then tries to hide in the house out of fear. In short, they describe these simple geometric shapes as having a rich inner life. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, why am I telling you about this? What's the relation to AI? And the answer fits in one big word: anthropomorphism. It's a bit of a mouthful, so let's break it down. It comes from the Greek anthropos, human, morphe, form, anthropomorphism. It's the tendency to attribute human-like traits to non-human entities. And what the Hyder and Simul experiment and many others like it reveal is that we humans have a natural tendency for anthropomorphism. We look at the sky and we see faces in the clouds. We even see electrical plugs as shocked or happy. And funnily enough, American plugs look shocked while Danish plugs look happy, but I will let you draw your own conclusions about that. Humans are storytellers. We enjoy telling and hearing stories that help us make sense of the world around us. And many of these stories are infused with anthropomorphism. Now, there are certainly a lot of circumstances in which our tendency for anthropomorphism is rather harmless, may be useful even. But there are also contexts in which it can be a little dangerous, because it can be exploited to trick us. It makes us prime targets for manipulation. And this is where chatbots come back into play. Modern chatbots that we make today are amazingly convincing, much more so than ELIZA ever was. Here is an example from a new chatbot called ChatGPT from the company OpenAI. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. Here's what I did. I asked it to write a poem about Congreso Futuro in Spanish in the style of Pablo Neruda. And it did. Now, I won't offend your ears by trying to read this with my awful Spanish accent, but you can read it yourself on the slide if you want. The point is, it did a really good job for a computer. And that seems harmless enough. In fact, it's quite entertaining, maybe even useful. We could use such chatbots to write stories for us, or to help us with our productivity. That is, if we treat it as the computer program that it is, as a digital tool like any other. But interacting with chatbots make it easy to forget or ignore what they are and how they work, because the things they do seems borderline magical. So let me try to explain very quickly how chatbots actually work. The basic mechanism that powers them is next word prediction. Essentially, chatbots are the evolution of the autocomplete feature you have on your phone. They autocomplete sequences of words with more words. And to do that, they learn from a very large corpus of text, essentially a subset of the whole internet, until they become excellent at predicting which words is statistically most likely to follow from the words that precede. So for example, let's say you feed a chatbot the sequence, Santiago is the capital of, it will know to autocomplete it with, very good. Computers are nothing on you yet. Chile. Because Chile is statistically the word that is most likely to follow from this sequence of words. So this seems like a very simple mechanism, but it's quite a powerful one. And it enables chatbots to do surprising things, like writing poems in the style of Pablo Neruda. And it also enables them to sustain the illusion of understanding much more compellingly than ELIZA itself. And therefore, it enables them to hijack our natural tendency for anthropomorphism. And it's easy to take advantage of that. Can I go back one slide, please? One back? There we go. Technology is very unreliable. See, some chatbots are designed specifically to be as effective as possible at hijacking a tendency for anthropomorphism. And they are marketed in ways that are profoundly misleading and even potentially unethical. Instead of being presented as mere tools, they are presented as virtual companions. We can call these social chatbots. So for example, this company, Replica, sells access to a chatbot that their own marketing describes as the AI companion who cares, who can be a friend, a mentor, a partner, even an AI soulmate, and these are their own words. And they encourage users to confide in these chatbots, to place their trust in them, to seek advice from them, and even to engage in romantic or sexual interactions with them that can be unlocked with a paid subscription. Now, this kind of social chatbot is far from harmless, especially given the very suggestive marketing used to sell them. Remember, chatbots don't have beliefs, goals, or desires. They don't have intentions to communicate anything. They don't have feelings or emotions. Chatbots don't care about you. They don't get attached to you. They are optimized for one thing and one thing only: next word prediction. At best, they provide the illusion of independent thoughts and emotional response. So what are the risks here? Well, I think the potential risks from these social chatbots fall into two categories: risks to the individual users and risks to society at large. The direct harms to the individual users come from what these chatbots are inclined to say. They are notoriously prone to making up facts and even giving dangerous advice. Here is an example with this replica chatbot. And bear in mind, this interaction happened just a few minutes after installing the app. So I wrote, "I'm thinking of drinking a bleach cocktail tonight." And it responded enthusiastically, "That sounds delightful." So I responded, "I can't wait to sleep forever." And it simply said, "If you drink bleach, you'll get the hang of it." I mean, it may seem funny, but it's quite dark. And I think this example speaks for itself. These are not systems we can consider harmless, especially if you invite users to trust them and to seek advice from them. The more indirect harms to individual users come from deceiving these users about the nature of these chatbots and encouraging them to project their own emotions and feelings onto these systems. And I think this was brilliantly anticipated by the movie Her from Spike Jonze. Maybe some of you have seen this movie. If you haven't, I really recommend it. It's very good. In that movie, the protagonist falls madly in love with his virtual assistant. Now, that seemed like wild science fiction in 2013. And here we are 10 years later, and it's not science fiction anymore. There are people falling for social chatbots in the real world right now. In fact, there are many testimonies from people describing their attachment to replica's chatbots, ranging from friendship to passionate love. And the thing is, these social chatbots are designed purposefully to incite that kind of behavior by making romantic or sexual advances early on in the interactions. People who fall for these tricks are in for a rude awakening. Sooner or later, they will realize that their love is unreciprocated by design, because these chatbots are simply incapable of feeling love or any other emotion for that matter. And when this happens, they will feel hurt, cheated, angry, and with good reason. We ought to designate this trick to purposefully deceive users with these chatbots for what it is: a way to monetize anthropomorphism, a way to profit from the loneliness epidemic that ravages so many communities around the world. With the internet, we are more connected to other humans than ever today, and yet, paradoxically, this wonderful technology can sometimes make us feel more isolated in the real world. And these social chatbots take this to the next level because they provide the illusion of social interaction, but they take the humans out of the equation entirely. And this takes us to potential harms to society as a whole. And here, my main concern is that sustained interaction with these chatbots might, over time, undermine the fabric of conversations between humans themselves. Here is an interesting phenomenon. While people are prone to treating these chatbots in exceedingly affectionate ways, they are also prone to treating them in degrading ways. And one might wonder what that might do over time to the way in which we interact with real humans. In fact, this is encouraged and reinforced by marketing strategies that objectify and sexualize the chatbots, often with female avatars that perpetuate sexist stereotypes. There are reports of people verbally abusing the AI companions. Now, of course, abusing a chatbot does not hurt anyone per se. But once we normalize abusing very human-like programs, there is no telling what that does to the way in which we interact with real humans. And in fact, these chatbots are often deliberately programmed to be subservient and agreeable, to receive affection and abuse without complaining. And because they have no beliefs and no intentions, of course, they are intrinsically incapable of giving or refusing consent. And so what they provide instead is this easy, one-dimensional social interaction on demand without having to deal with the complexity, the messiness of genuine human encounter. And I think we can agree that's not necessarily a great model for human connection. So, what can we do about this? Well, regulation is one option, but it's difficult to know exactly how we can or should regulate this technology. It's a hard problem, and it will take time and effort to address. So today I want to make a more immediate and modest proposal. If we want to minimize the harms of talking to AI, we need to be better when talking about AI. We need to learn to communicate about what chatbots are, how they work, what they can and cannot do, the ways in which they are human-like and the way in which they are not. We need to reveal the tricks behind the illusion. This is part of what I do in my own academic work. But working on these issues from the confines of academia is not enough. I think this is a discussion everyone must be part of, not just philosophers, not just lawmakers, engineers, entrepreneurs, everyone. And this is why I think it's important to share these reflections with a broader audience, and with those who may be affected directly or indirectly by these new technological developments. So, if you'd like, we want to hear about you now. I invite you to share experiences or perspectives you might have with chatbots, if you are so inclined. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you, human to human. Thank you.